Welcome back, everybody. This is Jason Ballard, your host of Soar Higher. And today we have a very, very special guest, Rob Johnson from Wayne Media and Speakeasy. Rob, welcome to the show again. Been on the show a few times. Welcome back. Good to see you. How you doing?
Good to see you as well. I'm doing really well. It's just another Magic Monday, as they say.
It is a Monday. It sure is. Well, so good to be back with you, my friend. We've had a great session last week talking about different types of marketing and aspects of marketing, some of the key points, and I had just a real fruitful conversation. I think the folks are going to get a lot out of it, and you're just very wise in your ways, and I think folks are going to enjoy that. This week, we're going to kind of twist this a little bit, still under the what I call marketing umbrella, but focused in on branding. So, Rob, talk to us a little bit about your perspective of branding. How do you even define branding? I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what these things are. So, kick us off.
There is, and one of the most impactful things that I've ever seen was there was a gentleman who was explaining the value of branding. And his argument he gave the example of Nike. He's like, well, Nike as a brand is pretty simplistic in terms of the design. It's a check mark. But he said the larger footprint of a brand, the more expensive it is because the more thought out the research needs to be. So for Nike, it's a global brand. It's on everything. Everything from bags to shoes to shirts, hats, even golf, even golf equipment. So Nike literally touches everything, basketballs. So there's so much to it, and the bigger a brand scope is, the more expensive it is, because people are like, well, I could just draw that swoosh. Well, you can, but what about the implementation of it? What about the scope and size and where it's going to be touching and how that's going to work? And there's also the story behind the brand. So my specialty is small business branding, largely because I largely only work with small businesses. So I understand really well how, the credibility of a brand translates into the marketplace. And that's really the first thing I look at is the brand authentic? Does the key parts of the brand speak to the end user in a way that establishes trust and credibility?
Well, those are really, really great points. And it's interesting, you talk about Nike, right? It's a check mark, it's a swoosh. Yeah. Everybody recognizes it. It's iconic, it's global. Everybody gets it. But I've always thought, how in the world did they ever get to the point of coming up with that logo? How many other designs did they look at? How many things did they go through? And how did they end on the swoosh? At what point, what were the factors involved where they thought, this is it, the swoosh. This is going to be the company logo that's going to take us global. What were those factors that led them to think the swoosh was it?
Yeah, as far as I understand the story, it seems like the biggest thing was universality. So can we develop something that can fit into a wide array of things yet still be recognizable? Yeah. And Apple had a similar story. They wanted something, and obviously Apple, it's pretty straightforward because the name matches the logo. But even with that, you have kind of the bite taken out of the apple, and then there's been several variations. But for them, specifically, they wanted clean, minimalist, recognizable. They wanted to stand apart. And for Nike, the way that I understand it is they wanted a logo that could fit into a wide array of items, yet still be recognizable.
Yeah. One key thing that I'm hearing you say that I've also seen out there in the world too is simplicity. Do you feel people overcomplicate their brand in their marketing?
I do. I think people put so much work into the design, and by design I mean just the overall appearance of the logo, that they don't think enough about the actual meaning of the brand or how the brand is going to come across to customers. Because one of my favorite Facebook ads I get all the time is people are like, we'll make you this custom 3D brand. 3D is very difficult to translate into the marketplace, especially for print and social, because it doesn't come across the same. So the more depth, shading, dimension, the more you have in your logo, the more difficult it's going to be for it to come across to the end user in a meaningful way. So I am a minimalist. I absolutely believe in, less is more. And that's because I want people to be able to tell the story behind that brand. So like for us with the Fox, the typesetting, like all of that has a story and a background that I can tell, and all of that means something to me. It's not just an icon.
Yeah.
There's a lot of thought that went behind it, even though it is a relatively straightforward logo.
I've always been told that when you come up with a brand and a logo and kind of an overall existence of your company, a visual representation, it should be so simple, like a caveman can figure it out, right? It's the old billboard adage. So simple, you get it, looking at it for 3 seconds or less, driving 80 miles an hour down the road, right? When you see the Cracker Barrel billboards when you're driving on vacation somewhere down the interstate, and you see, it's a plate of food with a little barrel and the Cracker Barrel logo, and it's, plate of food and hot food now, exit next, and it's so simple. It's so easy that you can just glance up at it and get it. And I think a lot of people miss that. So I'm interested. Let's talk about your company, Wayne Media, and Speakeasy Podcast Network. Let's talk about Wayne Media. You got an interesting logo there. How in the heck, what's your story? How did you end up with was it a fox or a dog or some kind of a four-legged animal and all that? Whoops. Tell us the story about that. How did you land on that and get to where you are today?
Yeah, so initially when I started the brand, we were Wayne Consulting Group. And in my mind, I wanted something to be so minimalist that literally the typeface stood out above everything else. So, we went and there was this font called Voga, which I couldn't really find anybody using. And it was a very, very clean, crisp, almost like what you would see on a law firm. And I was like, I really liked the W. The W looked really cool. It was almost like a checkerboard type of crossing on the W. It looked really cool. And so that's what we rolled with. But then as things evolved and we moved into Wayne Media because we were doing more media work than consulting, we went with this font called Senzel and just made it a little bit thicker and cleaner, still keeping that same legal aesthetic. Because for us, the cleanliness of the font, the spacing, all of that to me leads to credibility. It's clean, it's not messy, it's crisp. And then the fox came in because, as I was thinking about animals that I quite like and like to learn about, and also animals that are very much kind of in the same pathway as our business. Foxes resonated with me because foxes very much are outside the box thinkers. They're very cunning and sly and quick and really the kind of the leader of the pack in their domain. And that was what I wanted, was kind of a representation of us being always a step ahead of what's coming next in terms of our competition. And while I don't want sly and cunning to come across as, deceptive, because that's certainly not what we're aiming for, I do want it to come across as we are going to do everything we can to stay ahead of trends and be on top of things before anybody else gets there.
That's really cool. There's a lot of depth to that, a lot of thought through that, and I could see that. I've gotten to know you, and I can kind of see that. You know what I thought you were going to say?
Yeah.
Sometimes people, when you ask them their story, they'll tell you a simple kind of thing, and you're like, "What? Are you serious? It's that's where it came from?" Here's what I thought you were going to say. Like, hey,
back of a napkin.
I took my kids to Great Wolf Lodge. I like the wolf. I decided to use a wolf or something, right? Sometimes you'll hear that from people, and it's like, okay, I guess that works. But I like the thought in it. It has meaning. It connects. And now that I understand that, and I bet your listeners and your clients and prospects out there understand that, that makes a lot of sense in your line of work. And to me, it does give you that credibility. It sure does.
Yeah, and and there's so much more to the story, but for me, I just needed something that could differentiate us. And for me, I grew up in northern Michigan where there is no branding. Everything is just kind of done by one sign company, and there's not really a lot of thought put into the background of a business. And so I grew up seeing the worst logos and the worst kind of execution of a business plan, and just in the neighborhoods and communities that I was in. And a big part of that whole thing was like, well, I want something that is going to be clean and crisp and kind of represent the fact that we do try and run as a minimalist company. And I want people to understand that kind of from just the logo. And I think we've gone a long way to achieve that.
No, I'd say you have. It's very distinguishable, etc. I want to follow up on something. You said something, a particular word, many times on today's episode already. I want to make sure the audience is clear on what that is. Minimalist. You've used that many, many times. What is that? Help us understand that from your perspective.
Yeah, so minimalism really it's really just, I think of it as kind of an accounting tactic. Most people think of minimalism and they think of, you need to have the least amount of possessions possible. And that's really not it. Minimalism on the personal spectrum is, does everything that you own bring you value? So as I started to learn more about this philosophy and started adapting more to it, I started taking an inventory of the things that I have and own, and realized a lot of the things that I have don't really bring me a lot of value. So a lot of them I got rid of. And as I was building the business, I was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if we kind of ran our company the same way as well? Because there's so much, fat and inflation and bloat in companies, if we really were thoughtful about the things that we owned and the subscriptions that we had, and we had that mindset from day one, that would give us a really good advantage as well. So I've always ran on this principle of, does this item or does this subscription bring us value? And if it doesn't, then we probably don't need it. It's probably just there to look good or impress people or make people think that we're better than we are. And I'm just really not about any of that.
Well, that's interesting. I've heard the term a little bit. You've used it more than others that I've been around lately, and so I just wanted to kind of get some clarity on that. I appreciate that. I get it. It makes a lot of sense. It's another way to kind of look at it is maybe being lean. You back in the day there was initiatives for quality control and QA, and that kind of turned into lean and concepts like Lean Six Sigma. All really, really good things. Yep. But at the end of the day, as a business coach, I see this all the time in businesses all over the world, all industries, doesn't matter, where there's creep that happens year after year after year. And then you find out that you're paying for stuff you don't even know what you're paying for, and you thought you turned off. And there's just stuff that creates a load that you have to carry down the tracks that gets heavier and heavier, and it's harder to man. The more stuff you take with you, the more you have to manage, the more efforts involved, the more muscle you have to move to deal with it. So I like it.
Yeah, and a lot of times people will, they might have the cash in the bank to dump resources into something rather than actually thinking about resourceful ways to avoid having to spend the money and allocate it elsewhere. So this philosophy, at least for me, also gives me a perspective of how can we get away, not get away, but how can we do more with what we have rather than having to leverage cash to fix a problem. And sometimes you just got to spend the money, but it just kind of puts you through the extra exercise of not automatically going to, the bank to fix a problem.
Yeah, I see a lot of business leaders struggle with that, where they're busy, they got things going on, and the easy button is, just go ahead and do it. Just go ahead and pay for it, whatever, we'll figure it out. And they'll just kind of punt it down the road, kind of kick the can down the road. And a lot of times that comes back to bite them. If they did their due diligence up front, asked the hard questions up front, and really started connecting the dots of why are we doing this? Where's the value? How does this connect to our strategic plan, goals, priorities, and or doesn't it? And a lot of times it's a nice to have, or it's somebody's claims they need to do, but it's an out. It doesn't force people to really solve the problem at the root level. So I think that's a very powerful lesson for folks. And so, Rob, I want to switch gears on you. We're talking about branding and marketing for people, especially in the small to medium-sized business space. Talk to us about how you're different in your firm and how you help people with their brand, create their brand. What is the process you use, and how is that different?
Yeah, I don't know of a lot of agencies and kind of their processes. One of my favorite things is a lot of our team members, in the age of TikTok and whatnot, there's a lot of graphic designers that have put their process out there and have explained it. And that's always really cool to see how other people do it. One of the more unique things that I like when we do our branding process is that everything is very consultative. So we sit down and actually think about the mission of the business, kind of the heart of the business, understanding the why of the business. And really, we don't even talk about graphics or colors or fonts or anything like that until we understand the actual mission and purpose. Because if someone came in here and they're like, hey, I'm an accountant, but I'm an accountant largely just because I want to make money. I really don't care about the people. It's mainly just the paycheck. It's like, whew, that's going to be a tough one, because there's no heart behind the business, But what I've always found to be awesome, especially in the communities that I'm in, is people are so passionate and enthusiastic about their business. They want to put so much into the brand, and that's where you need to really be, you need to pick and choose what is going to shine through. So really it starts with consultation, which is, most people think it starts with, well, what do you want it to look like? Well, that's usually kind of in the second section of the meeting is, what do you have for a vision for the logo? And, and it's also important to note that branding is much more than just a logo. There's color science, there's typography, there's, the actual meaning behind it, the words that we use, the copy that we write. So there's a lot that goes into branding, but for me, it's always consultation. I always want to learn about the business before we even pick up a Apple Pencil to start drawing.
Well, that's very, very important. And how often when you meet people for the first time, whether they're in a startup or an existing business that's been around a while that may or may not have a good brand or market, they just kind of jumped out there and, just life happened to them and they opened up a business and, COVID struck and a business opportunity came and they took it and they, kind of got off to the great start, but now that the business is launched, they've got to go back. No matter where they are on their journey, in that process, how many businesses, when you start working with them, have really thought through these important things? Their vision, their purpose. Do they have clarity on those things? How many of them do? How many of them don't?
Yeah, it's hard to put a percentage to it. I would say that, we're probably somewhere in the 50-50 realm. Okay. We have some people that come in, like you're a tremendous example of this. Like the amount of thought and detail that you've put into everything is tremendous. And it makes our job as marketers easier because we don't have to go and do all of that thought work or walk you through that thought work because it's already been done. But then you get people, kind of to your point, that they might have started a roofing company and they went gangbusters and they're like, wow, I'm so concerned with serving clients. Well, branding has been on the back burner, but now that I have a team in place and I can breathe, I want to take what we've done and the success that we've had and wrap that into an identity. Yeah. And that's where it gets really cool because then, and we have one particular client we've worked with twice now. We branded them and now we've rebranded them now that they had a certain level of success. Now they've had more success and they wanted a rebrand. And it was so cool to do that because we were a part of both processes and it made a lot of sense. But it's really cool when people have, to hear the stories and I completely get it. A lot of owner operators that are out in the field, they're swinging a hammer. Branding isn't necessarily important in the beginning because they want cash flow and business reputation, word of mouth. But then once they start to pull back a little bit, they got a team in the field. Now they're like, okay, now these things are going to matter because the branding and the identity is what's going to sustain us from a 2-year company to be a 20-year company.
And you can be the same size company at 2 years that you are at 20, but you can also be a different size company at 20 as well, right? So what do you think are the top maybe 3 most important things about branding? If people are thinking about starting a business or branding a little different, maybe they're not as comfortable, they've got a decent brand that they want to really nail that like Apple did and Nike did, or maybe even rebrand into something bigger, better, different. I know one particular client that you and I both share has gone through and still going through a rebranding phase right now. And so when people are starting to think about this, coming out of COVID, kind of putting a strong foot forward, kind of getting the economy going again, a lot of people are thinking about how to rebrand. They've their business was maybe a little stale before, kind of riding on the coattails of the good economy before COVID hit. They've rethought things. They want to rebrand. They want to put a new foot forward that's bigger, better, faster, stronger, whatever. What are some top 3 things that you'd recommend people start with in that process?
That's a good question. I would say for the process, I would start by thinking about the answer to the question, what actually matters to you as a business? Like what's important? And for me, if I were to answer that question, like for what matters to me is ensuring that, my employees are well taken care of and that we're getting the right type of clients in the door. And people might think, well, that doesn't really help with the brand. And actually it does, because that helps narrow in on the mission. That helps you understand more about, what you're about. Because again, it's not all about the final design. So that would be the first thing, is what actually matters to you as a business. The second thing is, what other brands do you like? So now we're talking about inspiration. What other brands stick out to you? That helps us understand your likes. Because if I design a brand for you and I say, hey, listen, this is going to be, I don't care what you think. Listen to me, I'm the expert. When you take that brand home with you, so to speak, you're going to be less enthusiastic about it because you don't have buy-in. You're just listening to the expert. I want people to have buy-in. So I want this to be a collaborative process. So that's why the inspiration phase matters so much, because that tells me kind of where their leanings are. Because if you're motivated about the brand, you're more likely to push it, right? And I'd say the third question that matters is, where is this brand going to be seen? So when we talk about distribution, this kind of goes back to the Nike example. What are we putting this on? Is this going on a billboard? Is this going at a t-ball field? Is this going strictly digital? Where is this brand? Well, what waters is this brand going to be playing in? Because that helps us understand the size and scope of what it ought to look like as well. So to me, those 3 things are the most important.
Yeah, I love those points, Rob, and they're deeper. It forces people to think beyond money and instant gratification and hurry up and do something, get it out there kind of mentality that a lot of people are in. When you think about brand, I kind of think about it this way, and in some of the conversations I have with people when you're kind of setting them up for a brand, is what do you want the legacy of this brand to be? When people think of your brand, what's the first thing that jumps out? People that care about the environment, people that are shysters, people that are what is the legacy of this? When you think about Starbucks, that has a meaning, but it also connects to that why. So it's a combination of kind of the long-standing legacy you want this to be known for represents what? Your logo represents what? Good in the world, bad in the world, fast, cheap, easy. What are you really representing here, right? So you think about Starbucks. Starbucks really, in that logo they have, it's very simple. Green, white little background. But Starbucks isn't about coffee. Starbucks is about community. That logo means community. For them, it's about bringing people together. It's not about the food, not about the expensive drinks. It's about the atmosphere, the mood, the ability to provide an opportunity for people, whether you're soccer moms trying to, figure out the next soccer event, or two business people trying to launch a new business, or two best friends that reconnected, right? They're about bringing people together and giving them an environment for which they can flourish and allow their dreams to kind of flow out. That's the music they use, the vibe they have, just everything about them is what that brand represents. I was I overthought my brand and my logo, right? My logo has as you can see it behind me, has the two, there's a blue line that goes up in a circle. There's a silver line next to it that goes up into a circle. And in the Soar Higher, right? So it's showing you're soaring higher. You're going from one altitude to the next, right? Well, the blue and the silver mean something because I spent time in the Air Force. I'm retired from the Air Force. Those are the Air Force colors. That's me. That's what I've lived. I've bled blue and silver for many, many years. It means something to me. I'm also a business wingman, meaning I fly with my clients right next to them, helping them every step of the way. So the blue line in my logo is me. The silver line in the logo is my clients flying together. And at the tip of that, it looks like a little airplane looking thing, and they come together to form one joint unit to fly to the next level of success. So for me, that's about my why. My why is I've been a leader 12 times. I don't need to be another leader again in some other organization. It's time for me to build new leaders. It's time for me to give away my knowledge, my experience, my skills of what's successful out there in different walks of life, and help other people figure that out, because I can't lead. You can't lead forever. We've got to turn the reins over to the next generation at some point. And so that matters. So I ask the audience today to think about where you are. Where's your brand? Does it tell the story? Do people look at it and instantly get it and know that your brand is bigger than whatever product or service you're putting out there? It represents good in the world. It represents making a difference. It represents something bigger than you. And if it doesn't, then I would think about how you may be able to continue to do that and evolve that to a level like Nike, where they're global. No matter where you are in the world, no matter what language you speak or what time of the day it is, when they see that logo, they know what that means.
Yeah. And I love that. I love everything from the story of, your branding and also, the note to the audience to really consider the distribution side. And one thing I would let people know as well, just from my perspective, is, I hear this all of the time on the marketing side. People talk about search engine optimization, SEO, right? And people can get you to the top page tomorrow. Nope. That just doesn't happen. It doesn't work that way. Branding is very similar to that. It's not an overnight process either. The biggest thing, one of the biggest pillars of branding is someone being able to recognize it. And that ability to recognize something takes time and consistency. That's when someone knows it. And a great example is, in our Brighton office, it's right in downtown. We probably have, 50,000 cars that drive by our building every day, and there's a stoplight right in front. And we've been here 2 years, and even people in the downtown district, when I go and talk to them, are like, "Oh, where are you from?" And I'm like, "Speakeasy." They're like, "Oh, what's that?" So it still takes time, even if you have everything in place. And that's the point, though, is the consistency. So what I see people do a lot is they'll have a brand, they'll be like, it's not really hitting, or people don't really know it, and it's been like 4 months, they'll change it again. Every time you make a major brand change, it's basically like when you reset your cache in your browser. You're starting all over from the beginning. So you have to put in all your passwords again. You have to set everything up again. Like, you really need to be thoughtful about the brand before you move forward, so you don't have to change it. Or if you do, you make small modifications. That way it's still recognizable.
That's great advice, man. Especially entrepreneurs. The natural entrepreneur is to just want to tweak things and mess with things all the time. They're kind of antsy people that are, get bored easy, and they just want to make changes just sometimes to make changes, and it's not necessary. Mm-hmm. Figure out, work with somebody like Rob and his team, talented, experienced team of branding and marketing experts that can really flush out who you really are, what you're about, what it means to be whatever it is you're doing or providing that's helping the world in some way, adding value out there, and really, truly nail that at the root level. I look at a brand kind of like a tree, right? It needs roots. You got to plant that, and you've got to get that in solid ground and establish strong roots, because that brand should carry with you through the ends of time, right? Through the good times, through the bad times, through all kind of storms that will come in your business journey. That brand is tried and true. And if you don't have strong roots, that brand will not last.
Yeah, 100%. It speaks to diversity, because the more diverse your brand is in terms of your messaging versus your logo versus, the identity, the mission, the vision, you're going to lean on different things of the brand at different times. That's right. So the more data that's in there, the more diverse it is, the better it's going to be as you go through that, because you're going to find that people might resonate with your mission more in this one area, and other people might resonate more with the actual visual representation of the business in another. And that's where you can't just be focused on, how does it look? Because I can make you a great looking logo, but if there's no ethics, or if there's no philosophy of, care in the business, it means nothing. Like, that logo means literally
nothing. Well, it can be counterproductive, right? Because if your logo, if you're walking around, I've got a shirt on today that has an Under Armour logo on it, but if I had a shirt on that had my logo on it, and I was out and about on the streets and met somebody, a business owner at a business function, and they saw my logo and they asked me about my logo, and I'm like, why ask me about my logo? You should know what my business is about. I'm a business coach. You don't know about me? You haven't heard about me? And I come across in a crappy kind of way, not friendly, not nice. They're going to instantly associate negativity with that logo now there's assimilation to that you normally don't want to have, right? So when you think about that logo, how is the company representing that logo? Whether it's on a billboard, a t-shirt, a document, a brochure, whatever, is what's being taken away from that positive? Is it positive for somebody that's looking at it from the outside, looking in, that doesn't know anything about you?
What made me think about something as you were talking was people representing a brand. And one of the things that makes me the most nervous when it comes to that is when companies brand their vehicles.
All right, talk to us about that. I see this all over the place. What's going on with that?
Yeah, so essentially, when you have a vehicle that's wrapped, every interaction that you have with a car on the road is either positive or negative. There is no neutrality on the freeway. And that's important. And I've dealt with more PR issues from people writing into, whether it's Google Business or someone's Facebook Messenger, and, this guy cut me off and gave me the finger, and he's in your, branded van. And it's like, guys, what are we doing out here? So that is another element of it, as well as when, yes, it's awesome to have that mobile advertising. Like, you're seen by tens of thousands of people. However, there is also some really deep thought that needs to go into that as well. Because if someone isn't driving respectfully, if they're not driving at or under the speed limit, or if they're weaving in and out of traffic, like, those are all things that can actually negatively impact the brand. Because it's like, oh yeah, that's that's an electric company right there. But boy, do they drive like pricks out there. It's awful. You don't want that, especially in a local to regional market, to where that's the only place you're serving, right?
Yep. Now that's really funny, actually, because different people on the roads adapt differently. Some people may see somebody driving recklessly in and out of traffic, cutting people off, and they're like, man, those guys are jerks. Other people, like me, may get behind somebody that may be driving slower. They may be driving nice and easy, but going slow and holding me up. And I'm like, damn, these guys are too slow. I'm not going to work with them. I got to go around them. And right. So many different ways people can perceive that, which I think is kind of the point here, Rob. Your brand matters. Yeah. It's powerful. It's you. It represents something. It's not just a logo with a dog on it, or a cup of coffee on it, or a swoosh, or a check mark, or whatever. It's not just a logo. It's not an emblem. It represents your values, your integrity, and the core components of who you are, what you do, how you do it, and what people expect when they interact with you in your business. So you have to think carefully about that, and then how to execute that going forward.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this, just from my experience, if your brand or your company doesn't have values that you represent, you're not going to have a company much longer.
No, that's true, man.
And that's a fact.
That is so true. Well, Rob, great episode today, man. I think we've really hit on some very powerful things. Just a minute or so left here. What do you may have left in your little tool bag that you haven't talked about that you feel is very important for somebody to be thinking about and knowing and considering as they're thinking about their branding as we leave the show?
Yeah, I'll tell you this. There's a couple different ways you can approach branding. You can hire an agency like ours, but you can also go the do-it-yourself method, and there's nothing wrong with either route so long as there's thought behind it, as we've talked about. I understand businesses don't have the budget from the beginning. Some of them don't to hit it out of the park, but there's so many tutorials and guides and YouTube and just so much good information out there about proper branding and books. I would say when it comes to messaging, I would look at Simon Sinek's Start with Why. That would be a really good orientation to, why you're doing the things you're doing. But you can do a lot of it on the DIY side. But I will tell you, the express lane is to have, someone that's done it and kind of traveled that road be alongside you. But don't get intimidated by this, because this is a process. Just like everything else in business, it's not an overnight, I need to crunch and cram this into 12 hours. Branding is a process. So I would just, take the journey slow and just be thoughtful about every step. I certainly didn't have all my branding in place. As a matter of fact, I didn't have a website that I was happy with that I thought represented us as an agency until year 3. I mean, it took me 3 years to figure out a design that I thought matched who we were. And my team knows, because I complained about it all the time. And I was the one that was designing the website. So I just couldn't figure it out. It wasn't them. It was me,
Well, I think you were touching on something very, very important there. And so as you're listening to this, patience. This is a process. You're unless you're in some fly-by-night business, which I hope you're not, you're going to be in business for a long time. That should be your goal. Don't open a business if you don't plan to be in business for a considerable amount of time and try to do something important in the world, right? It takes patience for this to kind of bake itself into the market, get people aware of your story. It takes repetition, it takes frequency, consistency, and you just have to be disciplined and patient to the process and let it kind of take its life of its own, under the guidance of the experts that know how to do this and how to shape it and shift it. And it's like raising a child. It just takes time for the child to learn how to behave and for people to respond to your brand, just like people know how to respond to Starbucks or Nike or any of the other ones that we've talked about today. So, Rob, thank you so much, man. You're always just a bowl full of knowledge that just oozes over. You help people in so many ways out there. I've seen you give a lot of your time and attention to people for free, just trying to help shape and guide them and get them on the right path. And so just want to say thank you. Awesome show today. And so as we close, think about your brand long term. Be patient, be consistent, and you're going to do great. So look forward to seeing you guys next week on the show. We've got some more great topics, more great guests in store for you, and hope you have a great day.